Hey, Jeannie,
Yeah, Bruce.
who's our guest on the Nerd Show today?
Today we have Katie Patrick. Hi, Katie.
Hi, nice to be here.
Thanks for being here. What are we talking about today?
Well, I work on a whole bunch of things. Primarily, I call myself a Fitbit for the planet designer. I'm an ex-environmental engineer. So I used to work on green buildings. So a lot of my thinking is building centric. But then I went into producing a lot of content, trying to get people to care about the environment and learn about the environment. And then I realized that that was a really limiting worldview, that what we really needed to do was to drive action design. So I became really obsessed with how to drive action design and behavior design. And then I thought, well, how do we drive action? Don't we just need to show people the data? If we can just show people the environmental impact, the data of the environmental impact, then we can use that to drive some sort of behavior. And so where this goes into energy, what this podcast is about is one project I work on called Energy Lollipop, which is just getting the CO2 emissions from grid electricity and trying to show it to people with a color, just a color and a number. There's a terribly poor literacy about the carbon emissions of electricity, unless you really work in the carbon emissions of electricity, which some people listening to this podcast might. Most people, when we're asking people to take on decarbonization or energy efficiency interventions in buildings, really don't understand how much it fluctuates and how much comes from gas and how much comes from electricity. So let's just show people the number, make it red when it's bad, orange, green, blue when it's really good, and show people that enormous fluctuation. So that's what this thing, Energy Lollipop, is. It's a Chrome extension. We're also putting it in an outdoor light. And just really this principle or this design hypothesis of let's just put the numbers out there. And one guy who does this sort of design calls it in your face, in your space. How do we get the numbers of carbon everywhere? We have weather data everywhere. You can see weather and you can see the stock market all over the place, right? Why can't we see carbon emissions, especially when it comes to building and when it comes to energy, as ubiquitously as we see the stock market and with weather? And so that's this design theory behind this Energy Lollipop project that I work on.
What does the Chrome extension do?
It shows you in real time the kilotons of carbon dioxide from the California electricity grid. And it shows a chart and it shows a color and it shows a number. And when it's doing really well, it has a little confetti animation. And when it's doing really bad, it has like bats and skulls. And it's a really fun Chrome extension, partly because it's real time. So you can just click on it and you click on it 10 minutes later and it's changed. But it shows the very stark curve that you get, especially in California, where we have so much solar power, that it's like completely green. It's completely carbon free during the day. And then as it starts to get dark, you see it climb up, 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 up. And there's this really sharp spike that happens at about 7 or 8 p.m. And then it kind of drops off into the mid zone through the night. So it means you can just check on it. You just click on your browser and you can just see what the carbon emissions are. And it's been really important for also my carbon literacy as well, for just understanding the amount of CO2, the nature of CO2 in the grid.
If the carbon's high, then people can do something to lower their electricity or their energy and reduce emissions, right? And get on the high score and on the leaderboard for the game.
Yeah. Well, we started designing in some other features for another one that was in development. Yeah, putting people on leaderboards, giving people badges, more kind of fun gamification design. And it really worked. Like we were getting between a 40 and a 70% reduction in CO2. That's measured in CO2, not kilowatt hours. But also just really trying to communicate electricity in terms of CO2, because when we're here working on climate change, I mean, that's the number that really matters, and not all kilowatt hours are equal, and it could be different between gas and between kilowatt hours. But the industry is very built on communicating in kilowatt hours, and it completely changes the nature of the conversation and the nature of what kind of actions we're trying to drive when we communicate electricity in terms of the units of CO2 instead of kilowatt hours. So I thought this was pretty logical for me, but in meeting more people in the electricity industry, it seems to be a very novel way of doing things.
Definitely.
Yeah, to engage people, sometimes you need to make it like really fun and maybe even violent, like Grand Theft Planet or something. And then you get a lot of people.
Well, I definitely don't do anything that's violent. I mean, maybe fun, maybe not. I think it just needs to be engaging, not necessarily fun. And so that's kind of like a difference in a design principle. I mean, things can involve mastery and involve passion and involve challenge, and it can involve a kind of excitement of overcoming something difficult. So it doesn't necessarily need to be fun, but I think it does need to be kind of tap into a sense of agency and urgency of wanting to master something. And so by giving people a goal and giving people that kind of like that data feedback loop, it kind of encourages that natural feedback loop that humans have, that we like to come up with goals and we like to achieve the goals, and then we like to have some sort of recognition that we achieved the goal, even if it's like a smiley face, or it can even be a check mark, like you're going through a progress bar and then you finish and you get a check mark. Really simple kind of design mechanisms to take people through a journey and then give them kind of like a reward system. So in terms of like gamification design, you can employ very simple design methods like color, progress bars, check marks, not giving people like 50 energy efficiency tips all at once, just one thing, simple like CSS animations to just sort of guide people along the process.
That sounds great. So the lollipop is just available with the California ISO because they have the data or some other reason? And the next question is it expanding to other areas?
The energy lollipop Chrome extension is just in California, partly because my co-founder and I live in California. So that's where we started. And it was really easy to get the data to just like scrape and sort of ping their website. It was quite easy for us to build. If we get it to the next stage and figure out how to fund it with all of the different locations, it's quite a big build step to go up to being able to cater for a whole bunch of different locations and a whole bunch of different data feeds. So we need to figure out how to ask somebody for more money before we expand, but we're getting there.
You mentioned something in your literature about the social impact movement. And do you think there are some big mistakes going on with social impact investing?
I wouldn't say not specifically with investing. When I talk about an overarching mistake, it's the assumption that getting people educated about environmental issues and getting people emotionally concerned about environmental issues and using those as your main calls to action to try to engage people are some of the weakest ways of trying to drive action. Like if you actually want to get someone to install a solar panel or switch to an EV or get their home off gas with electrification, or to write a letter to a politician or use less plastic or whatever it is, those of us who are very concerned about the planet, we've worked in sustainability for a long time, we just fall to this natural assumption that we just need to get people to care more and get people who know about it. But this has been proven over and over again with behavioral psychology to be either not effective at all or very weak way of driving behavior. So that's the kind of big mistake I try to flag, that if that is your hypothesis of reaching out to people, that that's going to be the way to engage people, it's a very weak place to come from. There are much stronger behavioral drivers that you can use that can get people to do stuff. Say, for example, social comparison, like what O-Power does, telling people they're doing 20% better or 20% worse than someone else, getting people to work in groups, getting social imitation, showing these people are doing it. Can you imitate these people around you? Like with the energy lollipop concept of having like outdoor displays of data, it's called ambient displays of data. Can you show emissions with lights or whatever, like on a screen? Can you give people reward mechanisms like badges or smiley faces? There are so many ways that you can work as an action designer that can get people to do the action that is a completely different skill set to just trying to get people educated and concerned. So I advocate for less emotional concern, less education, more action and behavior design.
Sometimes I think our approach of educating and depressing people just kind of leads to lethargy and inaction, or even a backlash, right? And people might be like, oh, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, there's a really big problem with being overly negative with climate communications. A neuroscientist I interviewed for my podcast showed people scary images of climate change and also climate solutions. So we can divide all of our environmental communications into whether it's talking about problems or whether it's talking about solutions. And we haven't talked about environmental communications in this particular type of dichotomy before, right? Most of our whole movement has been very much talking about the problems, right? Rather than the solutions. So when you show people these images and you give people like a basic neuroscience test, the images of the problems cause people to, it triggers the fight or flight response. So people have a mental shutting down effect. And when I mean people, I'm sort of talking about an average here, a shutting down and a withdrawing, because it's negative, it's scary, we kind of don't want to deal with it. But when you show people solutions, solar panels, wind turbines, vegetable gardens, vegan food or whatever, it actually increases attention. So they'll actually be drawn towards it. And not only that, are they drawn towards it, a solution is naturally embedded with an action that we can imitate. And humans naturally copy each other. We copy each other all of the time. So if you're just showing images of the problem, you're not giving me something that I can copy. But if you show people a solution, one, it attracts attention, but you're really giving people actions that they can then emulate. So when it comes around to the action design bit, you're like, oh yeah, I see people are doing this. This is the new normal. This is what's expected of me. I will copy that behavior and then I will do it. So those of us that are in this game, I mean, we really need to be banging on about solutions, 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 still being respectful that we do need to communicate the severity of the problem, but not living in a world where all we're talking about is problem, 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 because that's just not how we're going to drive the action that we need.